Good morning and welcome to episode 7. My special guest today is synthesizer pioneer, music innovator, music educator, all-around nice guy, and outstanding musician Don Lewis. Where does music fit into your hierarchy of needs? Is it just an adjunct, something you can take or leave? Or is it an integral part of your life? In our culture, it seems that most people believe that music is just casual entertainment and not really all that important to a healthy life. But in many other cultures, music is as important as the air that we breathe. So, my first musical selection today is absolutely brand new. A couple of weeks ago, I had an idea pop into my head for a new ambient organ piece, and I started sketching some ideas out, and today you get to hear the first draft. This is called Don't Let the Waterfalls Die. You can read into that title whatever you want. This utilizes a layered rhythmic effect that is created by timed echoes and my looper pedal. So Other Stages is made possible through your generosity. You can leave a one-time gratuity at either Venmo or PayPal, or you can become a regular supporter of the show at Patreon. Those links, of course, are in the show description. Back in 2013, I had been working with the Rogers Organ Company for about 6 months, and I found myself at a company meeting at the factory in Hillsboro, Oregon. On that first day, a guy named Don Lewis gave a demonstration on one of our Atelier organs, and he absolutely killed it. A few days later, he gave a demo on one of our church organs, and he absolutely killed it. During the several days of the meeting, I got to sit down with Don, and we had many wonderful conversations. We were both organists who were intensely interested in synthesizers and other musical technology innovations. Don was an excellent player and a deep thinker. I enjoyed every moment I spent with him, and I got home and did the usual find him on Facebook and friend him kind of thing. And then I found out that there was a movie in production about Don Lewis. So I started digging a little deeper, and I found out that Don Lewis was involved behind the scenes in some of the most important musical innovations over the last several decades. So I invite you to enjoy first the trailer for the movie, The Ballad of Don Lewis, followed by the first of 3 conversations I recorded with Don Lewis earlier.
His vision of what instruments should do is still 10 years past our ability to make them.
Look at the things he invented and the things he modified. You're talking about a historic character here. He doesn't know it, but he is, you know.
Let alone putting a screwdriver and a soldering iron together to come up with the sound.
And it was up to us to make the sounds that would come to market.
There's all kinds of stories through history when you have the greats, the Galileos were persecuted. And you have to really think that Don Lewis is like a Galileo.
Don was a threat. He was an extraordinary danger to the Musicians' Union. I mean, the Musicians' Union at that point was hanging on for dear life.
To me, it was never an attempt to displace a musician, just another instrument and color in the orchestration.
There were a lot of things that they insisted continued as a tradition. One of which was black musicians were listed separately than white musicians.
I mean, it takes a while to overcome that kind of pre-programmed prejudice.
He was a pioneer. His forward thinking was way beyond what most people were even dreaming of.
He got it. How dynamic these sounds were and just how difficult it was to do that.
Already we think how to synchronize each other, already programmed, but he did it by himself.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm here with Don Lewis, my special guest today, and probably for several episodes. Don, thank you for joining me today. It's great to see you.
It's my pleasure, Tony. Man, this is been something I've been thinking about all week since we found out we were going to do this, and I'm excited about it. The fact that we have crossed paths, and especially in the organ world, and makes me really feel great to have this kind of format, especially because you are an organist, and I haven't talked to many organists who are doing this kind of thing, so this is going to be kind of fun.
Oh, cool! Thanks. Why don't we start out? Let's have you tell our audience a little bit about your origins. Where did you start out in life?
Oh, I was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio. My mom, her name's Wanda. She passed away a few years ago. Mom was a lover of opera. We lived in the projects, the Soda Bass projects there in Dayton, Ohio, metropolitan. Every Saturday, she would turn on the radio, and early afternoon, I believe it was, and to the Metropolitan Opera. And mom loved music, and she would play normally music all week, normally, R&B and whatever was popular during that time. And the radio would be kind of loud then, but on Saturday the radio turned down a little bit because she didn't want her neighbors to know that she liked opera.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because then that would have made her snooty, or what was the word Mom used to say? Hinty. That was a word she used, hinty. And I don't know what the origins of that are, but we got the drift that this was sort of out of the ordinary as far as the culture was concerned. That's how I got started listening to orchestral and vocal music out of the ordinary from my community. My grandmother, Rowena G. Mundy, was choir director at our church at the Mount Eden Missionary Baptist Church there in Dayton. And she became, at one point, the director of the Inspirational Chorus. The Inspirational Chorus was one of 9 musical organizations in our church. Granny had 2 musical organizations out of that, and that was the Inspirational Chorus and the youth band. She started a youth band back in the 50s.
Wow. So that's way ahead of the curve.
Yes.
That's way ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Because she saw that the kids, we were learning. That's when music was a part of the educational system. Mm-hmm. Every teacher had some idea of what music was and what it played, how it was played in the role of education. And it wasn't ancillary. It wasn't 4th grade, I think it was. Everybody had to learn to play the flutophone, which was a plastic recorder.
Okay.
And that's when we learned what the treble clef was, the G clef. And every good boy does find an FACE. Yeah. and so and I say that, prefacing that, because that meant that we had some knowledge. Every kid had some knowledge of what music notation was about. And I started getting interested in about 5th and 6th grade of drawing. Started drawing cars. I loved cars. And the bigger the trunk, the longer the trunk, the better the car was. I don't know what that was about, because that was the idea now. And one of my favorite car designs I loved, that was a production car, was a Studebaker. Remember Studebakers? And people used to make fun of them.
My grandmother drove a Studebaker.
Oh my God! But they were futuristic, man.
Yes.
They had the line. They have the lines in front, like the modern cars do now. Anyway, I started drawing those in 5th grade. And 6th grade, I started drawing houses. I got into architecture. And about that time, seventh grade, you could take mechanical drawing. And my mechanical drawing teacher was Donald DeWitt. And he took me under his arm, and we had shop. He was teaching shop as well as mechanical drawing. So we had to do all of that stuff. We had to draw what we were going to make in wood shop, and and we learned how to use tools. All of this stuff happened in elementary school. Going back to the church, going back to Mount Enon, I got inspired to learn to play the organ, and that's I talk a little bit about that in the film, in the documentary. Rivers would sit down to the organ. We had two organists there, Ulysses and Florence Upshaw. Florence Upshaw was my first piano teacher. But Rivers, there was some way that he would play the organ. It was a Wicks pipe organ. It was the way that he played the organ. He was a smooth player. He wasn't all over the instrument, but it was the chord choices, the registration choices, and he was a tall guy. So I mean, and he would sit down, and I don't know when this happened. I'm trying to think about. It must have been about maybe 12 years old. I started to get fascinated with that organ. And so after Sunday school, which was downstairs in the basement, I would come up, and then there were 3 seats behind the organ bench, and I would try to get in one of those chairs before anybody else did, and so that I could check out what was happening. And I must have done this for months. And finally one night I had this dream that I was actually sitting there playing that organ. And then after I had that dream, I said, I told my at that time I was staying with my grandmother, Miss Rose, Granny, and Grandpa, and I told her, I said, I got to learn how to play the organ. She says, well, you're going to have to learn how to play the piano first. I says, whatever. So I begrudgingly started that. But the first year I had piano lessons, Miss Upshaw, Florence Upshaw, I did not have a piano at home to practice on. I had a cardboard replica.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I've seen some of those.
Yes, I still have one.
Oh, neat.
To remind me from whence I came. It was an iPad, a stretched out iPad that never worked. If anybody understands how their fingers feel on an iPad to try to play something, okay.
Yep.
And but later on, she did buy me a piano after she saw that I was going to be serious about this. So I got an old upright. But that was the beginning. People who, and all of this is about people more than technology. I was interested in the technology, but because the people made the technology work. Okay. Because the organ did not do a thing until somebody pressed on it. You have to engage, and it's nice to understand that the engagement will give you something, and then you have to accommodate the characteristics of that instrument to be able to get something expressive out of it. And so you have to take on a new character. You have to learn new things. Those synapses in your brain has to, there's a whole new world there. You sit down to the piano, that's a whole new world. You sit down to a pipe organ, that's a whole new world. You sit down to a synthesizer, that's a whole new world. Getting back to the educational aspect of Dayton, because that to me is the foundation of of my curiosity. In high school, I was lucky to go to the Paul Laurence Dunbar High School. And Paul Laurence Dunbar, of course, is a poet laureate. At freshman year, with the instructor I was impressed with was William Young. He, I found out later, was a band leader. He had a big jazz band, and he played trumpet. He was a brass guy. So you know the personalities of brass people. I mean, they are out there. And he exemplified that. But the thing that he told us in our first class meeting, he says, "I'm here. If you don't learn anything else in this class," he says, "I'm here to tell you that I'm here to teach you to know, to find out what you don't know. That's what I'm here to teach you how to find out what you don't know, and it's a lot you don't know. And if you don't learn anything else in this class," and no one had ever said that to me before, or a group of kids. I don't know how many of the kids in that class got it, but there are those epiphanies, and he was the first epiphany in high school. And then my second one was Samuel Ewing, and Samuel Ewing headed up a shop, electronics, out of his own ingenuity, because there was no budget to buy electronic equipment. He would go out to Wright-Patterson. Of course, Dayton was right there at the seat of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They had a surplus depot, Gentilly depot, and he would go out there and get surplus World War II components, electronic components, and bring them back to the shop. We would disassemble them and take all the parts out and separate them so that we could build circuits out of those parts. That's how we learned to solder. That's how we learned to understand what resistors and capacitors. And we had to build. We built first a crystal radio, okay, and then from there we built a tube. This is during the vacuum tube era. A diode, vacuum tube. Then we learned how to build a power supply, because the power supply was actually the backbone of everything else we were going to build. So you got to have power before you can add the other circuitry. Then we built radios, AM radio and then an FM radio. And our final project, I think in my junior year, we built a television, and we explained it at a television at the fair that we had every year. Yeah. I mean, you talking about lucking out and taking advantage, and Sam would take students. I think we only had about 6 students in that class, and he was one of the guys who used to do house calls for TV repair. Okay, he did that on the side. Okay, and if we had some time to spend with him, he would take us out with him. And I remember, I talk about these are things that are not in the movie. we would go out, and there's certain teachers that have this mystique of really being stern, and we didn't call it stern, we said they were mean. Yeah. Okay, so Miss Stokes was one of those teachers that no one wanted to cross. And so the day, I think 2 or 3 days, we had gone out, and so I would ask him, I said, "Where are we going today?" He says, "We're going over to Miss Stokes' house." And I says, "What?" I didn't say that to him, but that's what my body said. So we walk up to the door. He rings the doorbell. Miss Stokes comes up to the door, and this woman's got a smile on her face, and she's laughing and joking with him and invites us in. Do you want some lemonade or something like that? And she looked at me and went, well, yes, ma'am. Yeah. So Sam and Miss Ewing were back in the kitchen and talking, and Sam told me to go ahead and do my diagnosis of what was going on with the TV. So I go in there and I'm start messing around with the TV, took the back off and all of that, and they're talking, and there was no high frequency. I couldn't hear any high frequency oscillator going off, so I knew that, and they didn't have a picture, or so that was either it was either the oscillator or something in the power supply that was not giving the high voltage. So I go in there and I'm peeking around and looking and tested a couple of tubes, and I put the tube in. I think it was a high voltage oscillator, horizontal oscillator. Put that in there. TV came on, boom, like that. And so I go in there and they're still talking, and teacher talking. And I says, I think I found the problem. So both of them come in. Oh yeah. Oh, she says, oh my God, you got the TV working. Oh my God, this is really great. So next time I saw Miss Stokes, and I'm walking down the hall, and normally, that first break was like, oh, you look the other way. You don't look at Stokes. And she looked over and she said, oh, Donald. She said, oh, I said, hi, Miss Brooks. Miss Stokes. And she said, I said, how's the TV? She says, that's almost like brand new. And it's those kinds of things you don't forget in your life.
That's right.
How you can bring joy and build a relationship over just knowing and respecting one another for what each other knows and will share with you. So those were very, very rich years. There's a lot of other stories. I'm thinking about my church, thinking about the music that we played. Most, people think that black churches only do gospel music and stuff like that. Our church, we had choirs who did gospel. We did the spirituals. We did Beethoven, Mozart, anthems, Mendelssohn. We did the whole gamut of stuff. And so, and the pipe organ, to play the pipe organ with gospel music, people look at you and say, you can't play gospel music with a pipe organ.
Yes,
I says,
you can.
I says it's got the same keys on it as any other instrument. And yeah, but it don't have the same. I said, well, it's the matter. It depends on your education, what you have been exposed to. The bulk of that is my upbringing in Dayton, Ohio. Understanding that in the projects that we normally think of, in Dayton, we had policemen who lived in the projects. We had insurance men who lived. We had faculty people who lived in the projects. This is during World War II and afterwards. And then there were single moms like my mom.
Yeah.
A lot of single moms. And then there were families that had mom and it was all mixed up. There were veterans. We lived right next door to a veteran, Mr. Ross, Mr. and Mrs. Ross. And I know I still remember those people and what they brought. And there was a community. If you went out and you did something and some other parent saw you doing something they knew it wasn't right, they'd come in, he'd give you spanking and then you said, Yeah, give me my spank, but don't tell my mama. Because I knew I would get another one.
So you will find a link in the show description that'll take you to the Ballad of Don Lewis, the movie about Don Lewis's life. And that's in the show description. And go ahead and buy it because it's a film you're going to enjoy again and again. So please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and be sure to comment and like today's show. My next piece of music, we're going to go to the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. This piece is simply called Arioso. So many of you who watch my show on a regular basis know that I discovered the organ back in 1977 at a restaurant called Pizza and Pipes. There are those moments in life that are completely transformative, and that summer night in 1977 was it for me. I knew at that moment that I wanted to be an organist, and nothing was going to stop me. What happened next was that I went down to the library and I checked out every book they had about pipe organs. And I was completely fascinated by the long and impressive technological history of these instruments. In the past, pipe organs often employed the latest technology in their mechanisms. One of the first commercial uses of electricity was the opening and closing of pipe organ valves. But the most fascinating part at that moment in time for me was the fact that some people had pipe organs in their homes. Well, that's what I wanted. My parents were, very negative people. And in their world, pretty much everything was impossible. And in fact, my brother and I nicknamed my dad Mr. Impossible. As you would probably imagine, as a kid, I was quite the motor mouth and a bit compulsive with whatever obsession happened to be occupying my mind at any moment. So once I had it in my head that I wanted a pipe organ at home, that was all I could talk about, and Mom and Dad, true to form, tried to explain to me how it was impossible to have a pipe organ at home. Well, their endless protestations and my endless obsessing were to no avail. I was determined to have a pipe organ at home. Now, in the beginning, I had set up lessons and a place to practice at a nearby organ store in exchange for doing some janitorial work. Through the organ store, I met a lot of local organ people, and I got invited to play at Pizza and Pipes on slow nights. On one occasion, I asked my grandparents to drive me there, and that proved to be a good thing for me. My grandparents' first date was at a silent movie accompanied by an organ just like the one at Pizza and Pipes. So while my mom and dad remained dead set against me being an organist, my grandparents became my biggest champions. After Grandma passed away, my grandfather wanted to buy an organ so that I could have something to practice at home. My parents were not really happy about this, and they were reluctant to clear out space in our house for an organ. Well, Grandpa lived right next door, so we just put the organ at his house. The first organ was a Wurlitzer electrified reed organ. It did not sound like much, but it was keys and pedals to practice on. I never stopped talking about having a pipe organ at home, though, and one evening I was at my girlfriend's house, and the phone rang. It was for me. Hello?
Tony, this is your mother. You need to come home right now.
Wow, are you sure about that? Because, Donna's parents are out and she's all alone.
Yes, you need to come home right now.
Well, naturally, I thought I was in some kind of trouble. I got home and Grandpa was there, and he said this to me.
So, Tony, you keep talking about a pipe organ at home.
Well, yeah.
Do you really think it's possible?
Absolutely.
Well, now you got one.
Well, what had happened was Grandpa had gone out and bought a pipe organ from a gentleman in Los Angeles. And over the next few weeks, we went down and brought the thing back up. And after consulting with a local organ technician, we kind of decided that organ was beyond practical repair, and my grandfather went out and bought a better pipe organ. That organ did get fixed up, and it remained in his home until he passed away in 1991. In anything that we do, we need people on our side. All too often, parents are not fully supportive of their children's aspirations. Now, I don't think this is because parents are generally mean. I think it's because they're protective. After all, my parents were dealing with a child who literally had a pipe dream. As a kid, I did not always fully appreciate the value of having a supporter right next door. but as an adult, I've grown to value everyone who supports and encourages my work. For me, following a pipe dream isn't optional, because you only live once. So last week, to close out the show, I played a little medley of some hymn tunes that I enjoy from my church days, and I kind of miss those, and I had such a good time doing that last week, I thought, let's do a couple more of those today. So here is Slane and Hyfrydal. So, thanks for joining me today. On next week's show, we will enjoy part 2 of my conversation with Don Lewis, and we're going to find out how he went from being a full-time electronics engineer over to being a full-time musician. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.